Okay, so it's interesting because I'm normally pretty calm when I come up to speak to a group, and my pulse is up today. I'm not sure why that is, but bear with me here. But I want to tell a story about leadership, and I want to tell first a story about a transformative moment for me. Is that going to work? Hello, there we go. So one of those defining moments. I think I've seen 2 slides with this as a title already today, so maybe that's the theme developing for the week. So I had a job. I was a lean director in a multinational global company. It was huge. I had a pretty significant chunk of it. I'd gotten that job and I was really struggling in it. And I got to, quote, work from home. What that really means is that nobody ever calls me. And I'm trying to get people's attention. And I really had a hard time. And the clouds are gathering, and the thunder's starting, and I know I'm just not feeling comfortable here. And then it was right after New Year in 2011, my phone rang, and it was my boss. And that was cool, because it was like the first time he'd ever called me. And he just had one message. And my feeling in that next 90 seconds was, thank God it's over. And it was a new dawn, it really was. And honestly, we wouldn't be speaking here today had that not happened. But it was a failure of leadership, but not their leadership, of mine. And I want to go through my background and then share with you what I've learned since that day. So what did I bring to that job? Well, I had terrific credentials. I could equipped very well to find technical solutions to technical problems. I had really good skills. This is when I'm learning that stuff. Really good, that's when my hair had color. Really good skills for teaching how to solve problems. I had really good skills for applying the tools in any situation. I understood the process and the cultural mechanics of the TPS as well as anyone, and I had Toyota people tell me that. So I kind of took that for what it was worth. I could easily make the case for what needed to be done and how, and the benefits and reasons for doing it. Solid logic. But making the technical case is not enough to affect change. Here's an example. I pulled this slide off of the internet somewhere, or somebody sent it to me years ago. I have redacted the name of the company. It's obviously a healthcare organization, and what are they doing in this presentation? They are making a logical justification for a technical solution of putting in a lean enterprise. They are no longer with us. They were absorbed by a much larger company. Where's Michael? And the point is, I knew the people there. I knew the lean directors there, and I knew what they were struggling with because they were making logical justifications. So what does leadership look like? We usually associate leadership with authority. And what I hear people like you all over the forums for years and years, the number one question is, how do I get them to buy into the change? Anybody ever ask that question in here? Yeah, a few hands go up, okay. So really what we're doing is we're appealing to those in authority to change their default behavior, to change their habits, aren't we? Okay. And so yeah, having formal authority can help get stuff done, but it's neither necessary nor sufficient to be a leader. So I'm going to borrow heavily from a model called adaptive leadership, which was developed by Ron Heifetz and Marty Minsky at Harvard. It's taught at a place in Wichita called the Kansas Leadership Center. And I'm going to borrow heavily from this model because I think it is kind of the answer here. Their definition, which I really love, leadership is mobilizing people to make progress on difficult challenges. Great words, challenge, that's kind of what we're all about, right? Here's their principle. First is leadership is not an activity, it's an activity, not a position. It's a role, not a job. Anyone can lead anytime, anywhere, but it starts with you, and you have to talk to people You have to engage other people to be doing it. You can't be at your email wishing people would do things differently. You've got to have a clear sense of purpose, and it doesn't always work. And sometimes you get that phone call. Here's the other thing. It's the skill set. So when we talk in here, all the technical skills that Jeff was talking about and everybody else is talking about, that's the technical skill set that I brought to the job. I was really good at that. But there's another skill set, because when I start to apply those technical changes, I'm going to surface organizational issues. And if we don't deal with those organizational issues, we don't get that technical change to anchor, and we're right back looking for the next mole to whack. The next technical change. Well, that didn't work, let's try this. So we usually expect to solve technical problems, and us, are usually expected to solve them. That's what they hired us to do. Most organizations don't even acknowledge that they have these issues on the other side. But this is where continuous improvement happens. It's this back and forth. It's my model. All models are wrong, some are useful. My model, we deal with technical change, we force an organizational change to the surface, we make the organizational change and anchor the technical change, and we're going back and forth between social and technical. So if I'm leading change, I'm having to alter people's behavior, and I have to acknowledge that. That's the job if I'm a change agent. It requires a fundamentally different style of leadership, and knowing the answers doesn't cut it, even if you are right. Especially if you are right. So, how to do it? Well, I can look that up on Amazon, okay? And I get 50,000 hits when I say how to do leadership or some search like that. And I'm going to say all of these authors are right. Each is reflecting what worked for her or him in their experience of what worked in their organization with their starting conditions to solve their problem. Technical solutions, which is what a lot of these books here, just follow these 5 steps and you'll be a leader. They're appealing because they offer us easy answers. All you have to do is do the stuff in the book. My reality is there's probably no sequence of steps that works every time. There may well be circumstances when nothing will work. We obviously can't prove that. But those words probably and may well be are vague, and there's no certainty in this process, and get used to it. Because that's the world that we live in. So whatever your benchmark reference is, you're starting in a different place. You're in a different jungle with different twists and turns, and you're going to have to start wherever you are, and you're going to have to find your own path. So how do we cross the gap to get from here to here? It looks kind of daunting in this picture, but how do we define that gap here? Okay? If it isn't clear and you can't just research an answer, how do you get from A to B? We seem to have a model for doing that. Because that's exactly what this is. That's the gap. So, how do I do that? Well, I got 4 fundamental steps that we can follow. But I want to talk about those in terms of how do I change leaders' behavior. So remember, leadership is mobilizing people, and your purpose has to be clear. Having a clear purpose as a change agent, okay, keeps you in the game. This is why I'm coming to work every day. And it reminds you which way to go when the seas are rough and you lose track of the compass. So you got to think before I'm beginning, what structure of interactions and relationships am I trying to create here? And think in those terms. It's not just the process of mechanics itself, but what are the cultural mechanics I'm trying to create? And you got to have a clear sense of that, or you're not going to be able to get there. You're not going to get there right away. But you got to know what direction you're trying to go, and you got to know, how am I defining progress? Because that's what the challenge does for us. Am I moving in the right direction? So how do I grasp the current condition here? I'm not going to go down with a stopwatch and look at leader meetings. I'm going to ask myself, what are the normal patterns of interaction between people? What's the restructure of relationships? How do they behave with each other? Do we have factions, conflict styles, conflict avoidance? Who's loyal to who? What are the constituencies in the organization? How are the efforts coordinated horizontally? What things cannot be spoken? There's a common trap here. I want to kind of get that into, okay? Remember this little slide? Well, here's what that looks like. It's they words. It's victim words. They're afraid of change. It's only about the numbers. They're trying to make the other department look bad. When you're attributing motivations to people's behavior, you are jumping to conclusions. You are making assumptions and not testing them. This is really, really easy to do. It's really easy to do. And that was my next one. How do you, change agent, how do you play in these dynamics? Can you detach and observe objectively when you must, and pull yourself out of the pool and watch from the side to see what these interactions look like? Do you need to be right, and does that keep you from seeing some other way? How many ways could you interpret what you're observing? How many different ways could you interpret it? And what experiments could you conduct to test those assumptions? And that experiment might just be talking to somebody and checking it out. Learning to do these things is hard. It takes deliberate practice. Tell me about it. I'm still working on it. It can be hard to challenge your own threshold of knowledge, especially when you think you know the answers and pull back. Wait a minute, this guy's really a nice guy. He's just in an impossible situation. So, key point here is culture, and your role in the culture itself is a process. It's a process that drives the habitual integration, or the habitual interactions and the relationships in the organization. It's messy, but there are underlying patterns that we can learn to see. So, what shift do you want to make? What structural changes might shift the pattern? What technical changes can I put in to try to shift the patterns of interaction? Now I'm talking about a target condition. What do you want people to say or do differently next week? Not at the end of the year, not when we're just like Toyota, next week. So maybe I just need a different structure in the morning meeting. Maybe I need Jerry and Ben to talk about actual goal versus we had a good day. And I want to get a couple of numbers up there so they get familiar with what were we supposed to get and where did the losses go, and just start accounting for them. First step. Maybe I'll drive some curiosity if I do that. What concrete step could you take to start to shape the behavior a little bit? But you got to remember, ultimately, you have to get at least one, probably more people to agree to do something different. This is a process of agreement creation. That's the tough part, because really that means it's a process of negotiation, isn't it? So, what obstacles are preventing you from getting that agreement? The obstacles show up here. So you might have to run an experiment to learn what those obstacles are. Just propose your change. That's honestly, that's an experiment. Hey, what if we did this next week? Then listen to the pushback, because you'll get it. But then listen to the feelings behind the pushback, because what's driving the pushback is fear. What's driving the pushback is fear. People don't resist change. Nobody returns a winning lottery ticket. I love that quote from Ron Heifetz. Okay? People resist loss. People resist fearful situations. People resist losing respect. They resist conflict. They resist being driven into conflict with their peers. They resist having to tell their team members that they have to change something because they want to be liked by the people who work for them. They resist a feeling of a loss of autonomy, or sometimes they resist a feeling of getting more responsibility. I'm running into that right now. They resist looking incompetent. The list goes on. I don't have enough time to go through every possibility, but this is what you want to look for. Those emotions are real. The perceptions behind them are real. You cannot dismiss them. Logical arguments will not have much influence here. So, how do I experiment against these obstacles? Experiment is an intervention. Experiment is a conversation. An experiment has got to involve a heavy dose of empathy and a heavy dose of listening. No one's going to hear a word you say until they feel heard first. How can you tell that's happening? When you stop talking and they say the same thing again. You didn't hear them. Each conversation is an opportunity to learn. Test your assumptions about what you're understanding. You will screw this up. I guarantee it. Keep your blast radius small. So how can I do that? Well, I can use turns of phrase like, well, it sounds like you feel, and I can name it. And then I'm testing it. I'm not saying this is what you're feeling. Oh no, that's not what I feel at all. Okay, well tell me how you are feeling. I can offer to get more information. I can say it seems you're going to really think I'm intruding by asking this, and I can name what they're going to fear most when I walk in the room. And get it out on the table, acknowledge that, and then I might be able to clear the path. Don't make them wrong to make a point. Because as soon as you do, you shut them down. We're all trying to do the same thing. This is the same slide I ended with last year. Who was here last year for me? Okay. Because it's the same thing. It's just a continuation. We talked about the meta patterns we're trying to build. This is how you build them. We want to create that environment where ordinary people receive extraordinary support to accomplish incredible things that no one else has ever done. And you got to keep that in mind as your purpose. Our takeaway message, again, is work really hard to apply what the Toyota Kata is teaching us, but don't lose sight of what you're here to learn, which is how to think and engage people scientifically and with experiments and the experimental mindset, even in the social engagements. Those are the skills you can take with you anywhere, and maybe we can have the same kind of outcomes that these two incredible brothers created for us at the turn of the century. Thank you very much.